Hey, what's up, guys? So, aside from dental implantology and all things dentistry, something that's really interesting to me is how people build brands, how they're able to start a product and then build a community around it and build a vibe around it. So, I'd love to start inviting people on to talk me through their journey. And so, the first person that I invited is the co founder of this brand called Shinesty. Which is an underwear brand. It's really unique and really niche, but I think they were able to do such an amazing job with their advertising campaigns and just really the community that they formed around it. So I wanted to invite one of the co-founders, Jens Nicolaysen, to share with us how they were able to start this company and take it from day zero to now the point where it's a nationwide brand. Here's a conversation. Hope you enjoy. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started, man. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I saw you guys up on the TV screen at my gym, and I was like, no way! I know those guys.
Yes, TV's been very good for us.
And I've been loving what you guys have been doing on social media. I mean, you guys have been gaining, I don't know, it seems like you've been gaining even more traction like in the last year. Is that right?
Yes, we finally got the right person in charge of our organic channels, and he's been doing amazing things with them for a little over a year now. But ever since he joined, it was definitely a clear inflection point. So
I see. Okay, well, yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, but I'd love to ask you, I guess I'd love to hear more about you, yourself, actually. I seen the brand and I read some of your interviews. But I'd love to know a little bit about you just as a kid. What did you want to do when you grew up?
yeah, well, I grew up in Casper, Wyoming, which my dad's side of the family has been there since like the 1800s in the primarily in like the cattle and sheep business. So it was very entrepreneurial. Grew up kind of watching my dad and my uncle. If something needed to be done, they did it. They kind of saw the direct impacts of their work. And so I always had this kind of entrepreneurial interest in mind. Um, and I always looked up to kind of the role models on that side of the family who were doing that. So much so that like even was into skateboarding when I was kind of like a middle schooler and a teenager. And I started my first business then selling skateboard wax to like various skate shops in the greater Phoenix area after we moved from Wyoming. So I started my first business basically when I was in fourth or fifth grade, something like that. That obviously was very small, but I think I kind of got the bug then. And
How did
fast forward, what's that?
how did you source that? How did you get your wax, and who did you sell it to?
I would like buy these like enormous like 4x4 plates basically of wax and kind of like melt them down, color them, add stuff to them in order to actually make the product. It was very janky. It was an assembly line in my garage, but
But
it worked. I at least got to sell some stuff, had a little walking around money,
yeah,
and yeah, that kind of gave me the bug. I went to college and kind of continued to be more and more interested in both like the really specifically consumer psychology, but I was pretty sure I didn't want to be like an academic or a doctor. And so I kind of translated this interest in like consumer psychology, behavioral psychology into marketing, which I really saw as kind of like the bridge between like what makes a business work and how do you like get consumers to do the things that ultimately drive the business. And so that's where like my early interest came from. Out of school, I did kind of like management consulting for a while before I met my now business partner, Chris. And he actually had the original idea for the Shinesty brand. I was like instantly like, oh yeah, I could see how this works. I see where I can add value. We clearly are both aligned on like wanting to create a more interesting brand. And yeah, that was me up until the point of starting Shinesty.
you guys, you guys met in your MBA program, is that right?
He was in his MBA program. I was actually already out kind of doing management consulting as he was, and we started the business while he was finishing both his MBA and his JD simultaneously. I was getting a lot of great experience doing management consulting, but it was for very large, very national brands, and it was always great because you're like, oh, I've learned things. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. But at the end of the day, you kind of like give your recommendations over and you cross your fingers and hope that somebody does something smart with it. So that was a great formative experience, but I was always kind of left with a desire to see where the rubber met the road and actually implementing all of the good ideas that we came up with. So
Do you self-study? You just like read books on that kind of stuff and learn, or how do you do your learning?
yes, definitely. I love all those kind of things. Love all the Malcolm Gladwell stuff, Freakonomics, like you name it, when stuff comes out about like what makes the mind work and, you know, sometimes subtle, sometimes more complex things you can do that really change the way a consumer behaves always fascinated me. And, you know, still when that stuff comes out, I'm always fascinated in it, but have tried to make it something that's like always in the background of the work we do, whether it's, you know, creative or conversion rate optimization or anything where it's applicable.
There's a lot of fundamental concepts that are so interesting. I remember falling in love with, I like the books from Malcolm Gladwell for sure. Then there was this one by Robert Cialdini, The Laws of Influence. What psychology is this so interesting, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and it's just amazing because it's like, as humans, like, you know, we think humans are complex, and they are, but there are some general things that, like, if you kind of abide by those laws, if you do what we know predictably, how predictably we expect, you know, consumers and individuals to behave, like, you can get a much better out.
And it kind of makes a lot of sense. A lot of times people think that you should go and just pound the pavement, sending your message like, buy our stuff, buy our stuff. But, you know, that's not the right approach if you understand the psychology behind it. It's like, you know, engaging things such as reciprocity and liking and like all these things are so much more effective.
Yes. And I think especially like if you're saying the same thing over and over again, which is tempting for a lot of businesses to do, especially like with sales and promotion messaging, well, you can only say that so many times before, one, consumers tune it out, or two, they come to expect it, which also has, you know, maybe even more damaging long-term implications. If all you're doing is selling on promotion, it makes it really hard to have a good margin business. But I think the main issue is that people tend to tune out seeing the same thing over and over again. And so if you want to stay top of mind, if you want to stay relevant, you need to find ways to engage your audience that isn't just buy now because it's this % off and now it's that % off.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that for sure early in the day because we were selling, like, the business has changed a lot, but in the early days, we were selling pretty niche products. We were selling ski suits and Speedos with, you know, denim jean print on them. And a lot of customers were telling us like, wow, this is really funny. I don't need this, but I'll pay attention. So we had to find clever ways to like keep people engaged because most of them didn't have a need for our specific products at the time that we were trying to talk to them.
So yeah, I think I noticed an evolution as I was reading your press releases and looking at your Instagram. There's an evolution of your business and of your product offering. Did you guys intentionally decide to throw stuff up on the wall and see what sticks? Or did you just feel it out and go as you got feedback?
Yes to kind of all of the above. So in the very earliest days of the business, we were like out of college. We didn't have a ton of money. We started the business selling vintage stuff that we would painstakingly source. And when the one sold, it never came back. But what that allowed us to do for the early stage of the business, which was really more geared around like theme parties and events, the kind of occasions where you might wear something more interesting because you're at a Christmas party or a tailgate or 80s ski day or whatever it is. And so we had this challenge early on where we're like, okay, there's all these holidays, all these events you might get, you know, kind of dressed up for. And then there's all these different product types that you might want for any one of those occasions. So it created this huge matrix of needs that was basically impossible to just go out and start manufacturing our own products against. But the vintage stuff allowed us to kind of figure out like, oh, this combination is lighting up and a lot of people seem to want this and a lot of people seem to want this. And that then helped us like go out and start to manufacture products like that we could sell over and over and over. Because obviously the vintage side is incredibly difficult to scale. And then, you know, over time, we kept getting this like resounding feedback like I alluded to, people loved the products and they loved the brand, but they're like, I just don't have that many needs throughout the year for this stuff. Or I've already got a ski suit. I'm probably good with that. And so underwear was a category that kind of fell into our laps accidentally. We discovered, and we're like, oh, this could be interesting. We can apply our like pretty irreverent brand in this category that a lot of people need and they need really often. And we think we can do our own kind of unique spin on it. And that was a major inflection point for the business, because that's kind of when we got a huge TAM category against a brand that people were really loving. And that was basically when the brand took off again.
Would you say that that was when that like light bulb was your product market fit?
I think we had product market fit before that, but the ability to scale it was really tricky, for a lot of reasons. One, the inventory and assortment needs to have all of these categories that are only relevant specific times of the year made it really difficult. You had to create a lot of products. You had to time up inventory perfectly. If you didn't time up get the right exact amount of inventory, you sat on it for an entire year at least. And so, and we also ended up being like a really Q4 heavy business. Like most of I think there was a year where like 80% of our sales were done in 8 weeks. And it was like, whoa, this is a really hard business to make predictable. And then, I mean, also on the marketing side, like if you're trying to create ads, test them, scale them up, well, there's always a hard cutoff. And then you got to reinvent yourself. And then you got to reinvent yourself again. So underwear is kind of like good evergreen category that now is translated to a lot of other basics categories that people need multiples of all year round.
I see. So you had product market fit before when you had unique offerings, but the inventory control was difficult because it was so varied and niche. And then I'm guessing you probably didn't have that many reorders as often as would be ideal. And also it had a relatively small TAM. But switching to underwear basically was totally different from that. Huge take reorders and inventory was much easier.
Yeah. And I would even clarify that, like, I think we had the best brand market fit.
Okay.
Even back in the day. Because again, people loved the brand. They're just like, I don't need another party suit. I don't need another funny Speedo. People were repurchasing again, because like if you had a great time wearing your suit to your Christmas party, you might do that again for St. Patrick's Day. But definitely the payback periods were longer. And yeah, I mean, it still was a tricky business to scale, but people absolutely loved the brand. And so that's something that's been very consistent throughout.
That reminds me of Virgin, right? They have a brand that people love and they can do anything with that brand. So I see you have like a vibe of your brand, a following, people that love that brand. And if you had a Shinesty party, if you had a Shinesty airline, people would follow you for your diehard fans would follow you. And so you guys were able to find a great solution in the underwear category that people were happily saw themselves in your brand.
Yes, exactly. And actually, fortunately, we did have and we still see this today, not just because our products have bigger markets in general, but in the early days, we found that just a lot of people loved the brand. It wasn't just young out of college folks like we expected. And the only reason we could think of was that humor is pretty universal. It's a really powerful, positive, emotional state that people want to be in. And so, yeah, I think people loved the brand and a lot of people were resonating with it. It was just like you had to have it was like finding a needle in a haystack to find a person who wanted this crazy party suit and could get it, because their party was in 3 days. And so that was what made that really hard. But
I understand. So you had an audience and people are like, hey, we want to buy from you, but we don't know what to buy here at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you guys, you and Chris met and he asked you, I guess, hey, you want to start this business together? And you were like, all right, let's do it.
Basically, yeah. I mean, we joked that it was kind of like a business blind date. Someone that he was working with, because he had a job outside school, was a friend of mine from college that was also doing marketing consulting in another group. And she's like, oh, he's starting this business. And like, I know you've wanted to start something. Maybe you two should talk. And it was kind of one of those instant where like, oh man, I get along with this person. I see the vision. I see how I can add value. Kind of scratches my itch that I always wanted, where I'm not just like able to think about the problem, but actually, do things to address the problem, be there where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And yeah, and I mean, I do feel like we kind of hit the jackpot. Chris and I are still both very good friends. We collaborate really well together all the time. So it's one of those ones where I'm like, wow, I feel like we got really, really lucky. You hear a lot about a lot of co-founder horror stories, and I'm like, that definitely was not us.
So can you take me from when you guys just said, yes, let's do this, to when you have your first shingle, like where you have your first place and things are happening. Okay, how about to your first order?
Yeah, to the first order, at first it was like, so Chris had already been doing some work on it. I think it was part of like an MBA project, and he was like committed to it. So he's like, oh, well, if you're interested, you got to come check out the inventory. And I'm like, oh, you've already got inventory? That's crazy. He'd been like scouring thrift stores up and down the Front Range here in Colorado. I went into his house and I'm like, God, your whole entire living room is just filled with these rolling racks of clothes and these boxes everywhere. So we already had some products we were planning on testing. And from there, it was like, let's get a logo. We went to 99 Designs. Let's find an inexpensive Shopify developer to make our first website. We couldn't hire a designer, so we just like learned how to do all of that on our own in whatever Adobe program we were doing at the time. And it was kind of just like, okay, in order to get to this next step, we got to do this thing. So we're going to learn how to do that thing. Then you get to the next one. And we kind of just, replicated that over and over again and kind of learned how to do everything from the ground level. In the background, while all that was happening, we had started to like create social accounts, and we put up a splash page that kind of had the vibe of what the brand was going to be and the types of products that we were going to have. And that actually ended up being like an enormously helpful data point for us, and kind of like, it basically helped us say, because we were getting email signups all the time. We were like getting people following our social pages. They're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so cool. When do you guys launch? I love this content. So the moment we like were ready to launch the site, we had this, not huge, but we had this little bit of a CRM that we could actually go out to. And so we launched, our first email kind of announcing that stuff was there. We were live, and like everything sold out within 2 days. And we were like, oh, amazing. Wait a minute, now we have to go find new stuff, because it was all vintage. It all was one-off. And so we had to go like redo it every single time. But it was really just kind of a natural, like a lean way to get some traction and prove that people were going to get the brand and there was a market for the products that we were creating.
So you walk into Chris's house, he's got his inventory already. Inventory he's already been kind of collecting. And you and him
littered everywhere throughout his main room. He had like a 2-bedroom apartment, and the entire main area surrounding those 2 rooms was just packed basically wall to wall with like stuff that he painstakingly found.
That's crazy.
Wow, your girlfriend's really forgiving. She must be really.
So, and you guys just started, like you said, just started working at it, but you're not doing sales yet. You're kind of like already instinctively following a product launch strategy by putting up some basic interest webpage. And you guys didn't launch for a while. Was it like 6 months or 3 months?
Yeah, I think I want to say it was like, close to maybe 4 to 6 months, something like that. I can't remember the exact time frame, but we were like, doing like startup programs and networking, and like, figuring out along the way what you needed to do to actually have a e-commerce website, launch it. And actually in the meantime, like tried to get some traction before that, like I was saying, with the splash page and the social channels, so that we could say like, oh, it does seem like there's interest, and we don't have to wait 6 months to prove.
Did you guys ever feel during that time period like we could also get no sales? This could also go nowhere. Like when we release.
I think there was always a question, but there was very clear interest. Like the way that people were engaging with us on our social posts and like the feedback we were getting on the splash page, people were like, oh yeah, when is this happening? Is this happening still? So I think there was some innate, like there was definitely interest that helped keep the momentum up and helped to keep us interested even before the site was transacting.
What was that conversation like with your wife? Because I think you met her in school, right?
I met her in school, yes.
You have this job with a big company, and then you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna quit my job and start and do this." Was she worried at all?
Well, I left out the part where I'd already left my like consulting job with the big group, and I was doing that on my own. So I'd already kind of gone out and I was like doing my own client engagements and working for myself. And I was kind of like, hey, I think I'm going to do this side gig with this guy that you've never met before. And even to this, she's so incredibly supportive still to this day. But the demands of the business, I definitely couldn't have done that without her. I think she was maybe a little bit like, oh, okay, you're going to sell vintage clothing online? Okay. But she was ultimately very, very supportive, and for that I'm thankful.
So when you guys launched, you sold out, and you said in 2 days with all your stuff, and then you just had to go and scramble to find unique inventory again?
Exactly. And that was tough. So we the path to getting to a scalable business really was like, okay, first we just kind of were throwing ourselves into like spare moments, go to thrift stores, go to that thrift store again in 3 months when they've turned over their inventory, go on vacation, go to different thrift stores. And then we started to find other things, like there were, bulk vintage sellers out there that we started working with. We created a huge network of like vintage buyers, people who were generally customers who were interested in like, hey, we'll give you a commission on stuff if you go out and find it. So they would go scour their thrift stores, send it to us, we'd sell it, give them some commission, and kind of create a cycle there. But again, to very amazing margins. You could buy like a ski suit for $3 and sell it for $300, but very difficult to get scale out of. But again, through doing that and figuring out all these combinations of like, oh, people really love like American flag windbreakers, and they really love 80s ski suits, and they really love vintage Christmas sweaters, we were able to find where we wanted to spend more time actually going out and producing our own product. And like flash forward nearly 10 years later, like basically 99% of everything sold on our site is designed and manufactured in-house.
So you were really, that was a time period where you were really studying your demographic and
studying the demographic and just like relentlessly soliciting feedback. Like we would make it a point to try to get on a call with like 15 to 20 customers every single week.
Oh, wow.
Like, how was the site? How was the purchasing experience? How was the receiving of the product? Did it live up to your expectations? Were there things you didn't like? And just trying to get as much feedback as possible so we could kind of rapidly iterate, like, how do we make our packaging better? How do we make our shipping options better? How do we make the site more functional and usable? And that helped really early on. We were kind of in this, there was a concept that we were kind of fascinated by, which is called 1,000 true fans. And basically it's this theory that like, if you have 1,000 customers that really, really love you, your business won't fail. Maybe it won't be, huge gangbusters, but it won't be a zero. And so we were doing everything we could to go above and beyond, like scrutinizing our content to make it as funny as possible, making our packaging as interesting as possible, writing handwritten notes in every package, talking to as many people as possible. And the 1,000 true fans thing, like we definitely wildly exceeded that. But the feedback and the ability to iterate early on really helped us make a great brand and a great product and a great experience from the get-go.
So how did you guys go from the point where you're selling out your initial inventory to deciding we need a place, we need that? I think I saw that you had an 800 square foot location. Is that your first spot?
Oh, there was an even smaller one before that. There was Chris's, one of the guys that he was in, like he was in his JD classes with, his law school classes with, had a garage. So first we started by renting a garage so that we could get it out of Chris's apartment. But yeah, then we were like, all right, we just need more space. We're not trying to make money right now. Like, and we moved from the garage that we rapidly outgrew to our first distribution center, I guess. But it was like this old cold storage facility that the National Center for Oceanic and Atmospheric Research used to store like stuff that didn't need to be climate controlled in. There was no heating, there was no water. And we're like, oh, we like it, but it's a little expensive. Could we just take a quarter of it to start? And our landlady at the time was like, sure, cool. And so we like very quickly went from like, all right, we can afford like the 2,500 square feet or whatever it was. And then like, oh, 2,500, then it was probably way less than that. It probably was more like 800 square feet. I think the whole building was 5,000 square feet. So we slowly like added on until we were the entire space, and filled out of there for several years until we got our first big distribution center.
How did you guys fund all that stuff up until that point? I know you had sales, but like, did you just throw in some money, and Chris threw in some money? And
yeah, early on we both put in what little savings that we had, and that kind of allowed us to buy stuff, put our Shopify bills, pay the developers that we needed and everything. And then for a very short period of time, we're just kind of funding it like out of what we sold, since it was very profitable. There really wasn't a lot of overhead to the business. But we kind of realized like, hey, to scale this, like you need inventory, you need resources. Like for a while, we were still picking and packing boxes like after work. And so we started by raising a very small friends and family round. It's like $100,000 or $125,000, something like that. That allowed us to get our first employee, who is still an employee today. Michelle runs all our internal operations. And from there, kind of Chris and I were able to start focusing on other parts of the business. And we raised that. We started to hire some other people so that we could send more emails, make more ads, and do all that kind of stuff. And then from there, we had a real challenge with, again, being able to scale the business, because we needed to buy to these minimum order quantities that felt very high for us at the time. We didn't have a ton of money, and we couldn't get any like debt to fund the working capital needs of the business. So we raised money in bigger rounds and convertible notes and things like that, and equity rounds, in order to basically fund just the working capital needs of the business. Because at a certain point, we were just like growing so fast, we had to place all these buys. We were getting strung out on terms because we, placed these big orders in the middle of the year for Christmas time. And then we'd have to like, because we had no terms, we had to float that for, months and months until the product could sell. And, banks would look at us for a short period of time. We're like, oh, can we get some debt? And you're like, well, you don't have like a venture investor, so you can't get venture debt. You're not really profitable. You have no history of profit, really, so we can't give you debt. And so, unfortunately, it's the most expensive way to fund the growth of the business, but we funded that all basically out of equity raises.
So, Jens, going from asking Uncle Tom for some money and then your friends to professional investing, there's like a big gap there. There's like a big leap, I'd say. I'd say on this side, it's like maybe a little bit easier. On this side, it's like, it just seems so intimidating to start raising money, professional money. How did you, how was that, like that foray into raising capital?
Well, this is really, I have to give my hats off to Chris, because he did this and he was really out there kind of selling the business. And it kind of started with that initial friends and family, which all things considered was maybe the easiest money that we raised, to when we started doing these bigger things, like you get to more and more sophisticated investors, like, angels and super angels and things like that. And it was a little like finding a needle in a haystack again, because you had to get people who were like interested in investing in e-com and were like, not what you're selling, what to who with what kind of brand, like, but the people that we got really believed in us. And I also think there was another one of those like, wow, I think there really must be something to this if people are willing to give us their money to sell wild looking clothing on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those early investors are still some of our best resources. So
I've recently raised some money as well through crowdfunding, and something I've come across is that some people get it. They vibe with your brand. They get it right away. You explain it once and they're like, yes. And then other people just seem like they don't get it and they won't get it. And maybe their feedback is just not going to be a constructive thing for you. Did you have the similar experience where you just have to put your blinders on and kind of go with the people that get it, the customers that get it, and not listen to the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of fundraising, I think a lot of people in a lot of industries, even if they're easier to wrap your head around for the average investor, you still, like, there are people who are easygoing, who get it, who like it, who write an easy check, and there are people who are like going to drag their feet. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to ask diligence that you weren't even prepared for, or that your business is not doesn't have a good predictable answer for, because it's not at that stage. And I'm torn, because I think you got to take all the conversations you can get. At least that was our experience. Like, you never know when you're going to get that person who loves it, gets it, and is like, cool, I'm in. Mm-hmm. And you kind of got to get through a lot of, tougher conversations in the meantime. But you still can learn a lot of things from those other conversations, understand people's apprehensiveness, because there is a lot of good learning and a lot of things you can take away from those conversations as well.
That's true. Yeah, you can take it one way and maybe be put off by it, or you can take it as, okay, what can I learn about this perspective?
Exactly.
I've heard a lot of people ask the question, what big leaps have you had in your business? And I think the answer, please tell me if this was your experience. I think the answer is there's no big leaps. There's just a lot of little leaps. What are some of the little leaps forward that you guys have made in almost like decade of business?
Yeah, but both Chris and I are very still to this day, kind of very lean startup oriented. If you've read that book, throw a lot of little things out there with as little effort as you can, and just figure out which ones seem like they're going to have the most natural traction and are going to have the wind at their backs. So we were always whether it was new product categories or new, occasions throughout the year that we wanted to make product for, new marketing channel tests, new business channel tests. We were always just trying little things. And fortunately through that, we got several big product categories that ended up being the anchor product categories for the business. That's how we got underwear. We were like, all right, we sell underwear. People need a lot of these. They're kind of expensive. What if we made it less expensive with a subscription? Here we are with, 6 figures of underwear subscribers every single month. So you kind of never know. You try to be as strategic as possible, and there's definitely something to saying yes to too many things and not doing any of them well. But had we not just been a little bit shotgun approachy and then going really deep in the ones that showed promise, we definitely wouldn't be where we're at today. But every little thing, we're the early days of Facebook, we don't really have any money, but maybe we should try this whole Facebook ads thing. And then, here we are. That's still our largest advertising channel. Subscription was another one. TV more recently has been one of those. It's I don't know. And most brands like us don't do it, but why not? It clearly works for the local car dealership. Why can't it work for us? We're more sophisticated than that with marketing in many ways. So, I mean, there are dozens and dozens of those examples throughout the years.
As far as the shotgun approach and seeing which ones hold the most potential, that probably means you have to kill off a lot of ideas. And you probably felt like you've had to kill off some ideas that you actually personally like. Does that ever happen where you had to kill an idea that you wanted to pursue? Is that tough to do?
It is. I would say that's been maybe even harder for us to let things go, because like, there's some things out there you're like, oh, we could just let this like eke along.
Mm-hmm.
But the more of those things you have eking along, there is actual like real drain on the organization to keeping all of those things going. Whether it's, product categories that just don't seem like they're working, or marketing channels that you're like, this works for everyone else. Why the heck can't we make this work? So I think if I zoom out, there's a lot of benefit to throwing things at the wall, but there's also a benefit to zooming out again and saying like, all right, what of this stuff can we just eliminate the overhead, eliminate the extra headaches that go along with it, focus on what's really good. And so over time, you're kind of like, build up, pare back, build up, pare back. And I'd say every year we have something like that. We throw a bunch of things at the wall, and just, if you get one or two even that stick and that can kind of compound on everything else that you're doing, you can continue to grow well.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you can continue to grow and diversify your business, whether that's channels or product categories or business models, whatever it is.
I remember that from Tim Ferriss. I think from 4-Hour Workweek, that's when I first came across the 80-20 rule. Like, most of the stuff that you're doing is not leading to like the biggest impact. It's not having the biggest impact. You just do 20% of that, and you'll probably end up being way more effective. But I personally found it hard to kill off the things that people have already invested time in, and they want it to work. And then, hey, guess what? That project you've been working on for a year, we're gonna kill it off now.
It's just not working. Yeah, but it is really important to do. We go through those cleanup cycles where we just have to look ourselves in the eyes and be like, we tried, it didn't work. Doesn't mean we can't try again, try a different hypothesis, but it is taking away from our ability to test something else that might work or invest in the stuff that we know is.
Jens, you're Chief Marketing Officer, is that right?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about one thing in particular about that. So one of the great masters of spectacle that I look up to is Richard Branson.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing spectacles. You guys are doing online spectacles. It's a bit different, but it's kind of for our time, right? The thing about, I noticed you guys use press releases really effectively. And the thing about press releases is, I mean, I could write a press release right now and put it up, and it can fall on deaf ears, right? If you don't do the right things around it to make it successful. How do you put all the pieces in play to make that successful?
On PR, for like PR specifically?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, you had this streaker guy that said the press release is you guys bailed him out of jail. I don't know. You guys seem to have a lot of very newsworthy things that, I mean, if you don't have all the pieces in play, they could be missed.
Yeah, I think the PR that we've initiated, we've definitely had organic press that like we didn't even know was happening, and then it hits and you're like, whoa, that was really good. If only we could recreate that again. But the stuff that we've initiated has all kind of tried to capitalize on the zeitgeist. And so there's a couple examples. One, when like the NIL deals became a thing, we're like, let's create the first, NIL college, the world's first collegiate athlete underwear model. Mm-hmm. And we got this huge center from CU, has a mullet, like was a great fit with our brand, really funny, great athlete. And that just, it was newsworthy, like it never happened. And it was kind of piggybacking on all of these NIL deals and all the news. And there were tons of writers tuning into stories in that realm. So that one worked really well.
Well, how do you get it in front of them in the first place? So say you guys decided to do that. Do you guys reach out to news channels and tell them, hey, we're doing this?
we use the big PR wires for that, but we also do more targeted outreach. Like, oh, hey, yes, these are writers who are writing about specific college athletes and NIL deals, because those people are like, if they had a story hit really well, they're going to be more inclined to listen to pitches about stuff that they know works. The streaker for the Waste Management Open, it was like, that got a lot of press just by itself. And then he went to jail, and we're like, all right, well, let's bail him out. It doesn't hardly cost us anything. We'll put it on the wire. We'll see if anybody cares about that. But he was wearing our product. And people were writing about it. So we're like, let's just see if we can kind of add more fuel to that fire. And that's been the best way. Those have been our most successful PR hits.
So how does that look? Is it just you and Chris, or you and Chris and a couple of other people at the organization sitting around having some beers and just being like, hey, what would be really cool to do? Is that how it looks?
Recently, it's mostly been from our creative director, who is also, wasn't our second, he was our third employee, and just very good at understanding, like, this is the right time for the story. This is why we are why Shinesty plus whatever we're doing is going to be newsworthy. And we don't have like a dedicated cadence for it. We just kind of are always like, hey, when we see the opportunity, we're going to take it. Sometimes they won't work. That's okay. But we try to be very opportunistic about that and just kind of keep our ear to the ground where we think we can, chirp in and make the story that much more interesting.
Is your creative director the one that's also in charge for sponsorships and partnerships?
He's the one who, he oversees all the creative for the business. So sometimes partnerships and sponsorships come up to that. But it's a lot of our ad creative, our email, the brand overall, the copywriting, the videography, all of that rolls up to him.
I see. So I hope you don't mind me asking so much. If there's anything that you don't want to answer, that's totally fine. How do you guys structure those? Or is that just basically like, hey, this person looks like they'd be a good fit. Let's just see if they're open to using our stuff, and maybe we'll pay them like some sort of retainer or something. Or
like the sponsorships of individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's people that seem like they have like a natural affinity for the brand. Mm-hmm. Like we just recently did this one with this just absolute legend. His name is Frankie LaPena, but
no, it's not.
At most, I don't know if everyone knows his name, but they definitely have seen his absolute dump truck that he's working with. The guy has a huge backside. And we're like, wow, there's just like not that many people out there who are like huge viral internet stars who have their content's rooted in comedy, and who their content is focused around the midsection of the body where our product goes. And it was kind of one of these things where like, I don't know if we can get him. The guy's got 20 million followers across his accounts. Like, I don't know if he'd ever pay attention to us. But, we kind of shot our shot and explained why we thought it was interesting. And he was very excited to be a part of it.
Because that would be a DM or what?
Yes, DM'd him, exactly. And all of the ones that we've done have been kind of that organic. It's like, hey, we're not just reaching out because we're shotgun blasting everybody to work with us. Mm-hmm. Reaching out to you for this very specific reason. And fortunately, because with that, our hit rate is very high, even though we don't do those very often.
When I saw
it just comes down to this, like having a very authentic brand fit. Mm-hmm. And being very, rifled and purposeful in the approach and how you want to work together and why it's going to be successful.
When I saw that you guys partnered with Frankie, I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect match. It's the perfect match.
It really is the perfect match. He is a great spokesperson for the brand. He's like, and his content, like you just can't turn away from it. So
as far as success goes, there's personal interpretation of what success looks like. Some people feel like, you just focus on creating a great product, creating a great thing, and that in itself is success. If Shinesty had never reached nationwide recognition, which it does, if it had never reached that recognition, if it never gets acquired or something, if it's always stayed small, would that still have been success in your eyes?
Yes, absolutely. Because even before had major inflection, we were still growing very fast. We're still a very large business by e-com standards. But when I think about success, like at least personally, individually, I think about, do I love what I'm doing? And I feel very fortunate that, it'll be 10 years this year for the brand, which is much longer than I expected. But I'm still having fun. I still enjoy new challenges, and the brand is still growing. And so I think a lot of people wake up and they don't really love what they do. And if you think about how much time you spend working, you think about how much time and effort and pain and strife it takes to build a business. Like, if you can do that in a way that you enjoy getting up and you look forward to getting on your computer or wherever you work every day, that is a massive success. Because I have way too many friends who don't, and know of way too many people who don't have that in their life. And they spend 40 to 60 hours a week doing something that they don't love. And time is the most precious commodity of them all. Like, if you're spending time doing something you don't love, you're kind of wasting the one resource you can't get more of. So for me, success is loving what you do. And I think the more you love what you do, the more likely that the outcome of it is going to be better. It just goes up tremendously. If you don't love what you do, you're not going to work as hard, you're not going to work as well, and you're not going to get those other benefits that come along with it, monetary or whatever.
I understand you got a big part of that worldview from your dad.
Definitely. Yeah.
Very cool. Jens, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me and answering all these questions about your journey.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real honor.
All right, brother. We'll stay in touch.
Yes, absolutely, man. Be good.
See you, man.